I am Arthur. I am 32 years old, and exactly 2 years ago, I walked out of my own brother's multi-million-dollar wedding after discovering my assigned seat was in a service hallway right next to the industrial trash cans. While I stood there holding a carefully wrapped wedding gift, my brother smirked at me, took a sip of his expensive bourbon, and said, "Guess you don't count." My parents were standing just a few feet away inside the ballroom. They saw the whole thing. They looked away, pretending not to notice. They let him humiliate me in front of hundreds of high society guests, treating me like an unwanted stray dog who had wandered into their perfect day. But there was one thing they did not know. The small silver box I left on the gift table before I walked out did not hold a standard registry item. It held a stack of financial statements, offshore bank transfer receipts, and printed text messages that were about to completely obliterate his perfect life. And now, they are the ones constantly calling my phone, begging for my help because they are drowning in a massive lawsuit. Before I tell you exactly what happened in that crystal ballroom, hit that like button if you believe in justice. And do not forget to let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Now let us go back to where it all began. The air in Vermont that morning was sharp, cutting through the thin material of my charcoal suit. It was the kind of crisp, thin autumn air that smells like pine needles and old untouchable money. My brother, Leo, had chosen the lakeside resort for its European charm and its massive, exclusionary price tag. It was the kind of place where people only took photos to prove to other wealthy people that they had been invited. The glass ballroom overlooked a pristine, mirror-like water surface, strung from ceiling to floor with white orchids and hundreds of floating candles in crystal bowls. Every single table inside shimmered under the massive chandeliers. The parking lot was a parade of wealth. I saw a sleek black Porsche, a vintage Ferrari, and a pristine white Rolls-Royce idling near the entrance. Mine, apparently, was a seat out by the service elevators and the garbage disposal. I had driven up alone, a grueling 3-hour drive from my small apartment in Boston. The entire drive, the hum of my tires on the asphalt was drowned out by the memory of my mother's last text message playing on a loop in my head. She had sent it at dawn, a cold, calculated strike before the sun even came up. "Please, Arthur, no drama today. It is Leo's day. Do not do anything to embarrass us in front of Chloe's family." That was all I ever was to my mother, Eleanor. I was an instruction. I was a warning label. Do not make noise. Do not take up space. Do not remind anyone there is another son in the family who does not wear designer suits, who does not drive a luxury car, and who actually has to work for his salary. Walking into that venue, I felt the heavy weight of my off-the-rack suit. I had bought it specifically for this event, spending a good portion of my savings just to look presentable, just to fit into the background of their family photos so I would not be an eyesore. The valet took my beat-up sedan with a barely concealed look of pity, handing me a ticket while the owner of the Rolls-Royce was greeted by name. I tipped him and walked up the grand marble steps. The sounds of a live string quartet drifted through the heavy oak doors. I could hear the clinking of crystal champagne flutes and the low, polite laughter of people who never had to worry about a mortgage payment, a medical bill, or an empty college fund. The hallway where the wedding coordinator eventually directed me smelled strongly of lilies and industrial bleach. It was a jarring, nauseating combination. The expensive flowers were meant for the guests, the harsh bleach was meant for the staff, and I was caught somewhere in the middle, sitting on a squeaky folding chair. I tightened my grip on the small, silver-wrapped box I had spent hours preparing the night before. I smoothed the lapel of my suit and chose silence. I did not argue with the woman holding the clipboard. I did not shed a single tear. I just sat there for a moment, absorbing the absolute, undeniable reality of my place in this family. Through the glass panes of the ballroom doors, I could see the DJ inside, counting down on his microphone to the grand entrance. I saw my mother adjusting her expensive pearls, her face glowing with a fierce pride she had never, not once in 32 years, directed at me. I saw my father, Richard, laughing with a group of men who looked like they traded real estate portfolios for sport. And I saw Leo. My brother was standing tall, looking like a prince in his custom tuxedo, holding court. I realized then that this was not a clerical error. The seating arrangement was a deliberate message. It was the final period at the end of a very long, very painful sentence that my family had been writing for over 3 decades. They wanted me there just to prove they had invited me to avoid gossip among the guests. But they wanted me hidden so I would not ruin their pristine aesthetic. I stood up, holding my silver box. I walked out into the Vermont air. 5 minutes later, the string quartet stopped abruptly, the chandeliers seemed to dim, and a scream cut the entire resort in half. It was the sound of a perfect illusion shattering into a million sharp pieces. But to understand why I did it, why I let that bomb detonate in the middle of a wedding, you have to understand the toxic soil in which this resentment grew. I thought the worst part of my life was just being ignored. I was so incredibly wrong. Growing up in our house, we were the living, breathing cliché you see in tragic family dramas. We were the golden child and the invisible shadow. Leo had ribbons, trophies, and a college fund that was fiercely protected and constantly bragged about at every neighborhood barbecue. I had report cards that sat and signed on the kitchen counter for weeks until I forged my father's signature just so my teachers would stop asking. If Leo scraped his knee playing soccer, it was a medical emergency requiring a trip to the doctor and a week of pampering on the couch. If I broke my arm falling off my bike, I was told to stop crying and walk it off because I was disturbing my mother's soap operas. Mom always told the neighbors at the local HOA meetings that I was the easy one. Dad told his golf buddies that I was highly independent. Both of those phrases meant the exact same thing. Arthur is convenient to ignore. Invisible was convenient. I started working at a local Walmart when I was 15 just to buy my own winter coats and school supplies. When it came time for college, my parents sat me down at the dining room table and explained that they had to prioritize Leo's tuition because he was going to a prestigious business school. They simply could not afford to help me. I watched my college fund, the one my grandparents had started for both of us, get entirely liquidated to pay for Leo's fraternity dues and spring break trips. I took out massive student loans and worked grueling night shifts. I built a career in graphic design from the ground up, paying for every single meal, every single textbook with my own sweat. But the memory that truly broke the foundation of my family loyalty happened on Thanksgiving, 3 years ago. I remember arriving at my parents' suburban home. The house smelled like roasting turkey, lemon cleaner, and burnt pie crust. Leo was not there. He was vacationing in Portugal with his new girlfriend, Chloe, the daughter of a massive real estate tycoon. For once, the air in the house felt light. I actually thought my parents and I could have a normal, quiet holiday. We sat at the table, ate in relative peace, and I even managed to have a conversation with my father about the weather that did not end in an argument. After dinner, my mother asked me to go up to her bedroom and grab an old photo album from her vanity drawer. She wanted to look at pictures of Leo's old hockey games to send to Chloe. I walked into her room, pulled open the heavy oak drawer, and reached for the album. But beneath it, my hand brushed against a small, brown leather journal. Its edges were soft and worn from years of use. Curiosity got the better of me. I opened it. I flipped through the pages, expecting grocery lists or daily thoughts. Instead, I realized every single entry began the same way. Leo's first day of kindergarten. Leo's favorite meal. Leo's college acceptance letter. Leo's first car. I flipped further, scanning desperately for my name. I checked the dates around my high school graduation. Nothing. I checked the dates around my college graduation. A day they did not even attend because Leo had a minor cold. Nothing. Not a single line about me. Not my birthdays. Not my achievements. It was as if I did not exist in her reality. But then, I found an entry dated 10 years prior. I froze. I read the messy handwriting twice, my stomach dropping into my shoes. It was about the time a significant amount of money had gone missing from the community church fund, a fund my father managed. The entire neighborhood had whispered about it. My parents had subtly blamed me, claiming I had fallen in with a bad crowd. I bore the shame of those whispers for years, losing friends and respect in our small town. My mother's journal read, "Found the church envelope in Leo's closet today. He spent it on a new gaming system." I cannot let Richard know his boy is a thief. It would break his heart. I told Richard the first suspect Arthur took it to buy art supplies. Arthur is strong, he can handle the discipline. Leo is too sensitive. We have to protect Leo's future. My own mother. She had framed me to protect a thief. She had actively destroyed my reputation to preserve the illusion of her perfect son. I walked downstairs holding the journal. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely grip the leather binding. I walked into the kitchen and dropped it on the granite counter right in front of her. She looked at the book, then looked at me, her expression completely flat. The warmth from the oven felt suffocating. I asked her why. I asked her how she could sleep at night knowing she had branded me a thief to our own father, to our own community. I demanded an explanation for the decade of cold stares I had endured from our neighbors. She did not cry. She did not apologize. She simply wiped her hands on her apron, sighed as if I were a toddler throwing a tantrum, and crossed her arms. You never needed the attention, Arthur. You were always fine. Leo needs us. You always twist things to make yourself the victim. It was a long time ago. Let it go. That night, walking out of their house and driving back to my apartment in the freezing rain, I learned that there are two kinds of forgotten. There is being lost and there is being intentionally erased. My family had chosen the latter. Things only escalated when my Aunt Beatrice got involved. Beatrice was my mother's older sister, a woman who treated emotional manipulation like an Olympic sport. She was wealthy, unmarried, and considered herself the absolute matriarch of our extended family. A few months after the Thanksgiving incident, I was practically forced to attend a family dinner at an upscale steakhouse to celebrate Leo's promotion at Chloe's father's company. Beatrice spent the entire evening talking loudly, making sure the neighboring tables could hear about Leo's upcoming engagement to Chloe. It is a brilliant match, Beatrice declared, swirling her expensive red wine. Chloe's father is the CEO of a massive development firm. Once Leo marries in, his future is secured. That is how you build a legacy. The inheritance alone will guarantee our family's standing for generations. She then turned her sharp, predatory eyes to me. And you, Arthur? Still drawing little pictures on your computer? When are you going to get a real salary? A real career? You know, your mother worries constantly about who will pay for your funeral one day if you keep living paycheck to paycheck. I kept my mouth shut, gripping my fork until my knuckles turned white, and focused on my steak. But later, when I went to the restroom to escape the suffocating atmosphere, I overheard a conversation that made the blood run cold in my veins. Leo was standing in the alcove near the exit, talking on his cell phone to Aunt Beatrice, who had stepped outside for a cigarette. He had stepped away from the table to take her call, not realizing I was walking up behind him. I know the ring was expensive, Aunt B. Leo was saying, his voice low, calculated, and entirely devoid of the charm he showed Chloe. I just need a loan for a few more months. Once I marry Chloe, I will have access to her trust fund. Her dad is already talking about putting me on the board of directors. I will pay you back 10 times over. The girl is sweet, but she is completely clueless. A few fake tears, a few romantic dates, and I am set for life. I just have to secure the inheritance. If she ever catches on, I will just file for divorce and take half the marital assets. I already spoke to a lawyer. I stopped dead in my tracks. He was not marrying Chloe for love. He was running a long con. He was treating a human being like a hostile corporate takeover. I backed away slowly, my heart pounding violently against my ribs. I wanted to warn her. I wanted to scream in the middle of the restaurant. But who would believe me? The bitter, estranged brother who the family already branded a thief? They would just say I was jealous. I needed proof, bulletproof evidence, and I was about to get it from the most unexpected source, plunging me right into the center of a storm I never asked for. The wedding invitation arrived in my mailbox exactly 2 months before the big day. It was printed on heavy, cream-colored cardstock with elegant gold foil lettering. But it was not the invitation that caught my attention. It was the printed insert tucked neatly behind it. It was a list of rules. I read the bullet points standing in my small kitchen. Guests are requested to adhere to a strict dress code. Please refrain from speaking to the photographer unless prompted. Please do not wear any shade of navy blue or black, as to not clash with the groomsmen. And then, written in blue ink at the very bottom, in my mother's unmistakable, sharp handwriting, Arthur, please sit near the back. Do not attempt to give a speech. Do not mention your job. We want this day to be flawless. I stared at the paper. It was a gag order disguised as a wedding invitation. My best friend and business partner, Sarah, was sitting at my kitchen island drinking coffee. She had seen me through the darkest parts of my depression. She took the invitation from my hand, read the handwritten note, and shook her head in disgust. "Do not go, Arthur," Sarah said, her voice full of genuine concern and anger. "They are completely toxic. You do not owe them your presence. They are just going to use you as a prop to show everyone how gracious and inclusive they are, while treating you like garbage behind the scenes." I looked at the gold foil lettering. If I don't go, I prove them right. I become the bitter, estranged brother who couldn't even show up for his family. But if I go, I am doing it on my terms. A week before the wedding, I received a message on my professional design portfolio website. It was an anonymous contact form requesting an urgent meeting at a diner outside the city limits. The message simply read, "You need to know the truth about your brother before he ruins her life. I have the documents. Come alone." I debated ignoring it. I thought it might be a trap set by Leo to somehow humiliate me further. But the memory of Leo's phone call with Aunt Beatrice pushed me to go. I arrived at the diner at 9 p.m. The place was nearly empty, smelling of stale grease, old coffee, and bleach. Sitting in a back booth, wearing a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes, was Julian. Julian was Leo's best friend since college. He was supposed to be the best man at the wedding. I slid into the vinyl booth across from him. "Julian? What is this about? Why the secrecy?" Julian looked exhausted. He had dark circles under his eyes, his skin was pale, and his hands were jittery as he gripped his coffee mug. He reached into his jacket and slid a thick, brown manila envelope across the sticky table. "I can't do it, Arthur. I can't stand up there next to him and hand him the rings knowing what he is doing to that family." I opened the envelope. Inside were dozens of printed pages. Bank statements, corporate emails, legal documents, screenshots of text messages. "What am I looking at?" I asked, scanning a spreadsheet that showed massive, unauthorized wire transfers to an offshore account. "Your brother got a job at Chloe's father's firm 6 months ago," Julian explained, his voice hushed and terrified. "He is supposed to be managing their local real estate acquisitions. Instead, he has been quietly funneling company funds into offshore accounts under a shell corporation. He is stealing from his future father-in-law. We are talking hundreds of thousands of dollars. And worse." Julian pointed with a trembling finger to a stack of printed text messages. "Read those. They are from Elena, his former assistant. She found out about the transfers. He threatened to destroy her career and tie her up in court if she spoke up." I picked up the screenshots. The texts were between Leo and Julian. "Leo, the old man is completely clueless. By the time we get back from the honeymoon, I will have moved enough cash to buy the Miami property outright." Julian, "Leo, this is fraud. You are going to prison if Marcus finds out. This is a massive lawsuit waiting to happen." Leo, "Marcus is a dinosaur, and Chloe is completely blindly in love. She signs whatever I put in front of her. If things go south, I'll just push for a quick divorce, claim I managed her assets, and take half the marital wealth. My lawyer says it's foolproof. Just smile for the cameras, man." I felt physically sick. My stomach churned. My brother was not just a spoiled golden child. He was a calculating criminal. He was a predator who saw people only as stepping stones or bank accounts. "Why give this to me?" I asked, looking up at Julian. "Why not go to the police? Or take this directly to Marcus?" "Because Leo has a team of corporate lawyers ready to bury anyone who crosses him," Julian said, running a hand over his face in despair. He has already threatened my job. He told me if I backed out of being best man or blew the whistle, he would ruin my reputation in the finance sector and make sure I never worked again. But you have absolutely nothing to lose with him. Your family already hates you. You are already an outcast. You are the only one who can drop this bomb without him ruining your livelihood." He was right. I had absolutely nothing left to lose. My family had already stripped me of my dignity, my childhood, and my reputation. They could not take anything else from me. That night, I drove back to my apartment with the envelope sitting on the passenger seat like a ticking time bomb. I called Sarah immediately. She came over at midnight, and together we spent 6 grueling hours organizing the evidence. We bought a secure USB drive and loaded every single PDF, every bank statement, every real estate document, and every screenshot onto it. Then we printed the most damning text messages, the ones where he openly mocked Chloe, bragged about stealing the money, and detailed his divorce strategy. I found a small, elegant silver box in my closet. It was originally meant to hold a luxury watch I had saved up for but never bought. Instead, I folded the text messages neatly at the bottom. I placed the USB drive carefully on top. Finally, I wrote a note on thick cardstock. My handwriting was neat, deliberate, and entirely devoid of emotion. "Chloe, I am deeply sorry. You deserve a marriage built on love and respect, not a corporate heist. Check the drive. Arthur." I placed the note inside, closed the lid, and tied a perfectly neat silver ribbon around it. Sarah watched me, her arms crossed over her chest, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and awe. "Are you sure about this?" she asked softly. "Once you do this, Arthur, there is no going back. It is the absolute end of your family. The fallout will be biblical." "They ended it a long time ago, Sarah," I replied, staring at the silver box under the harsh kitchen light. "I am just officially signing the paperwork." The drive to the lakeside resort was a blur of autumn leaves and highway lines. I had the silver box resting on the passenger seat next to me. It felt infinitely heavier than it actually was. It felt like 32 years of silenced anger, neglect, and gaslighting condensed into a 6-inch cube. I didn't listen to the radio. The silence in the car was my preparation, a deep breath before plunging into the freezing water. When I finally walked through the grand double doors of the resort, the sheer scale of the event hit me. This was not a wedding. It was a coronation of greed. There were massive swan ice sculptures melting elegantly in the corners. Waiters in pristine white gloves circulated with trays of imported caviar and vintage champagne. The floral arrangements, cascading walls of white roses and orchids, must have cost more than my entire annual salary. The opulence was sickening when I knew it was funded by deceit. I walked toward the ballroom entrance, looking for my name on the massive, gilded seating chart displayed on an ornate wooden easel. I scanned Table 1, where Chloe's powerful family sat. Table 2, reserved for my parents and Aunt Beatrice. Table 10. I scanned all the way down to Table 30. My name was nowhere. Not a single letter. A man with a clipboard and a wireless earpiece stepped into my path. He wore a tight, stressed, overly professional smile. "Can I help you, sir? Are you looking for your table?" "Arthur Hayes," I said evenly, keeping my voice steady. "Brother of the groom." The coordinator, whose gold name tag read Greg, paused. His professional smile faltered for a fraction of a second. He looked down at his clipboard, flipping aggressively past the VIP sections, past the general seating, all the way to the very last page. "Ah, Mr. Hayes. Yes. You are listed under alternative seating." "Alternative seating?" I raised an eyebrow, though I already knew what was coming. "Follow me, please," Greg said, his tone shifting immediately from deferential to slightly dismissive, recognizing that I held no power here. He led me past the glorious glass doors of the ballroom, where the lighting was warm and golden. We walked down a carpeted corridor, and he pushed open a set of heavy wooden double doors that led to the service hallway. The change in atmosphere was jarring. The elegant string music became muffled and distant. The lighting shifted from romantic chandeliers to harsh, buzzing fluorescent tubes. Catering staff members were rushing past, pushing metal carts stacked high with dirty dishes and bins of melting, dirty ice. And there, tucked into a dim corner right next to the swinging doors of the kitchen and a row of gray plastic trash cans, was a small, flimsy folding table. It had a cheap, wrinkled white tablecloth thrown over it. A single metal chair sat pushed against the cinderblock wall. There was a thin paper place card resting on the table. It simply read, Arthur. Greg refused to make eye contact with me. He pointed vaguely at the table. Your dinner will be brought out here during the main service. The restrooms are just down the hall past the loading dock. He turned on his heel and practically fled back to the glamour of the main event. I stood there alone. The smell of garbage and industrial floor cleaner was overpowering. Every time the kitchen doors swung open, a blast of heat and shouting chefs washed over me. I set my silver box down on the folding table. I looked at my reflection in the glass of the fire extinguisher case mounted on the wall. I looked presentable. I looked like a man attending a wedding, but I was being treated like a disease they had to quarantine. Suddenly, the service doors leading to the ballroom burst open. Raucous laughter spilled out into the hallway. I looked up and saw Leo walking toward me. He had a thick, expensive cigar in one hand and a glass of bourbon in the other. He had stepped out for a moment of quiet away from his new in-laws, but when he saw me standing by the trash cans, his face lit up with a cruel, deeply satisfied amusement. He stopped a few feet away, taking a slow, arrogant sip of his bourbon. He looked me up and down, taking in my cheap suit, the pathetic folding table, and the harsh lighting. Well, Leo said, his voice dripping with venomous condescension. Looks like Greg found the perfect spot for you. I did not react. I kept my face entirely blank, my hands resting lightly at my sides. Did Mom arrange this, or did you? Leo chuckled, a dark, ugly sound, tapping his cigar against a nearby metal ashtray. Does it matter? It is exactly where you belong, Arthur. Out of sight. You always were a massive downer. We couldn't risk you sitting with Chloe's extended family and saying something pathetic about your little design business. These are important people. We can't have them associating us with failure. He took a step closer, lowering his voice. The mask of the charming, devoted groom slipped completely, revealing the arrogant, manipulative monster I had known my entire life. Guess you don't count, Leo said. The words were soft, almost a whisper, but they were designed to hit like a physical blow. You never did. Just sit here, eat your free meal, and slip out the back door when the dancing starts. Do not ruin my night. I looked at him. I really looked at him, perhaps for the last time as a brother. I saw the expensive watch on his wrist, bought with stolen money. I saw the arrogance in his eyes, built on a foundation of lies, fraud, and our mother's toxic enabling. I didn't feel angry anymore. The rage that had been boiling inside me for 32 years suddenly evaporated, leaving behind a cold, absolute clarity. You're right, Leo, I said quietly. My voice did not shake. I don't count. Not in your world. He smirked, satisfied that he had finally broken me, that he had won the lifelong competition I never even wanted to play. He turned his back on me, pushed open the doors to the ballroom, and stepped back into the light and the applause. I picked up the silver box from the folding table. I did not sit down. I walked past the trash cans, past the kitchen, and straight to the main reception table near the front entrance, where a massive pile of beautifully wrapped gifts sat under a spotlight. The attendant was distracted, helping an older guest with a heavy coat. I placed the small silver box right in the center of the pile, right where it could not possibly be missed. Then, I turned around, walked out the front doors of the lakeside resort, and handed my ticket to the valet. I did not look back. I got into my car, started the engine, and waited. The storm was about to hit, and I was going to watch the lightning strike from a safe distance. I sat in my beat-up sedan in the sprawling parking lot of the lakeside resort. The engine was turned off, and the cold Vermont night air was slowly seeping through the thin glass of the windows. From where I was parked in the back row, hidden in the shadows of a massive oak tree, I had a perfect, unobstructed view of the grand glass windows of the ballroom. I could see the golden, intoxicating glow of the multi-tiered crystal chandeliers. I could see the silhouettes of the guests moving gracefully across the polished oak dance floor, and the towering floral arrangements that looked like something out of a royal magazine. It looked exactly like a snow globe. It was a perfectly sealed, flawless, entirely fake world built on the back of stolen money and deceit. And I was holding the invisible pin that was about to shatter that glass into a million jagged pieces. Inside the ballroom, the reception was moving exactly according to the meticulously planned, minute-by-minute schedule my mother had bragged about for months at her neighborhood meetings. The dinner plates, which I knew consisted of imported Wagyu beef and seared scallops, had been cleared away by the invisible catering staff. I watched the waiters in their crisp white uniforms weave seamlessly through the tables, pouring ridiculously expensive vintage champagne into crystal flutes for the upcoming toasts. The live, 12-piece band was playing a soft, jazzy tune that I could barely hear through the thick glass. It was a low, steady thumping of bass that vibrated through the worn leather of my steering wheel. Through the massive floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see Leo and Chloe sitting at the center table, elevated slightly on a dais so everyone could admire them. Leo looked like the absolute king of the world. He was leaning back in his velvet chair, one arm draped casually over the back of Chloe's seat, holding a glass of amber bourbon in his other hand. He was smiling that signature million-dollar smile. It was the exact same smile he used to charm our parents into forgiving his childhood thefts. It was the smile he used to secure his unearned promotion at Chloe's father's commercial real estate firm. It was the smile he flashed right before he stabbed someone in the back and took their wallet. He was so incredibly smug. He genuinely thought he had won. He thought he had successfully hidden his embarrassing, low-income brother away by the trash cans, secured his future inheritance, and pulled off the greatest financial con of his entire life. My parents were seated at the VIP table right next to the newlyweds. My mother, Eleanor, was practically glowing with a radioactive level of pride. She wore a champagne-colored silk dress that probably cost 3 months of my salary. She kept reaching over to touch Chloe's arm, playing the role of the loving, devoted mother-in-law to absolute perfection. She was cementing her new social status. My father, Richard, was deep in conversation with Marcus, Chloe's father. Marcus was a terrifyingly powerful man, the CEO of a multi-million-dollar commercial real estate empire. He was a man who destroyed rival companies for sport and fired people before his morning coffee. My father was laughing too hard at everything Marcus said, desperate to secure his own social standing by association, hoping to get a piece of that lucrative pie. I sat in the dark and watched them celebrate their own arrogance. I gripped the steering wheel, feeling the freezing plastic under my palms. I did not feel sad anymore. I did not feel the crushing, suffocating weight of being the unloved son. I did not feel the sting of the hallway seating. I just felt a deep, chilling, absolute calm. The kind of calm that comes when you realize you no longer owe a single ounce of your loyalty to people who would gladly watch you drown if it meant keeping their shoes dry. Then, the sequence of events I had been waiting for began to unfold. Someone inside handed a sleek, silver microphone to the wedding MC. I saw the guests turn their attention toward the center of the room, their champagne flutes catching the light. A large, ornate table, draped in heavy white silk, had been rolled out onto the edge of the dance floor. It was the gift table. In many of these high-society, old-money weddings, there is a tradition of opening a few select gifts in front of the crowd. It is usually the most expensive ones, just to show off the wealth of the families involved and to publicly acknowledge the most prominent donors. My mother had specifically requested this to show off the silver and crystal they were expecting from Marcus's billionaire business partners. I saw Chloe step up to the table, her massive, heavily beaded white gown dragging beautifully across the polished wood floor. Leo followed close behind her, playing the part of the doting, supportive groom. He whispered something in her ear, making her laugh brightly. The professional photographer rushed forward, dropping to one knee, snapping rapid-fire pictures of the happy couple as they stood before the mountain of beautifully wrapped boxes. And right there, sitting squarely in the middle of the pile, elevated slightly by the boxes beneath it, was my small, elegant silver box. It caught the light of the chandeliers perfectly. It looked completely harmless. It looked like a luxury watch box, or perhaps the packaging for an expensive piece of custom jewelry. Chloe reached for it first. The shiny silver ribbon must have caught her eye among the sea of gold and white wrapping paper. She picked it up and held it delicately in her hands. The room grew slightly quieter as the guests watched with polite anticipation. The MC made a joke over the microphone, something about good things coming in small packages, which made the wealthy crowd chuckle softly. Chloe pulled the silver ribbon. It fell away smoothly, dropping onto the silk tablecloth. She lifted the lid of the box. From my vantage point in the dark parking lot, separated by glass and 50 yards of manicured lawn, I watched her body language change in a matter of seconds. It was like watching a horrific car crash in slow motion. She did not pull out a Rolex watch. She did not pull out the keys to a luxury vehicle. She pulled out the thick stack of folded, heavy stock papers and the small black USB drive. I saw her brow furrow in deep confusion. She looked down at the handwritten note I had placed right on top. Even from this distance, I knew exactly what she was reading. Chloe, I am deeply sorry. You deserve a marriage built on love and respect, not a corporate heist. Check the drive. Arthur. Leo leaned over her shoulder, a patronizing smile on his face, trying to see what was inside. The smug smile on his face vanished the exact second his eyes registered my handwriting. I saw his jaw drop. He reached out quickly, a sharp, aggressive movement, trying to grab the papers from her hand. But Chloe was faster. She stepped back, out of his reach, her eyes locked on the documents. She unfolded the first printed page. It was the screenshot of the text message between Leo and his former assistant, Elena. The one where he openly bragged about treating Chloe like a naive bank account, stating he only needed to fake a few tears to get the house and the name. I watched Chloe's face drain of all color. The radiant, joyful bride completely disappeared, replaced by a woman staring directly into the abyss of a horrible, unthinkable betrayal. Her hands began to tremble. She flipped to the next page. A bank statement showing the unauthorized offshore wire transfers. She flipped to the next page. A corporate email detailing the shell company Leo had secretly set up using her father's resources, planning to siphon off her inheritance. The live band suddenly stopped playing. The violinist lowered his bow. The silence in the ballroom must have been deafening, because even the low bass thumping against my car window ceased entirely. Hundreds of people stood frozen, watching the bride shake violently. Leo panicked. I could see the frantic, terrified energy in his movements. He lunged forward again, shouting something that I couldn't hear, trying to snatch the papers out of Chloe's hands by force. But the aggressive movement caught the attention of the entire room. Hundreds of pairs of eyes were suddenly locked onto the bride and groom, sensing that something had gone terribly, fundamentally wrong. My mother stood up from her table so fast her chair tipped backward and crashed onto the floor. Her hand flew to her mouth. My father looked completely bewildered, his jaw hanging open. But the most important reaction came from Marcus. The CEO did not look confused. He did not look shocked. He looked like an apex predator who had just smelled blood in the water. Marcus set his champagne glass down on the table with a harsh, definitive motion that sloshed the expensive liquid onto the linen. He stood up, buttoned his tailored suit jacket with terrifying calm, and walked onto the dance floor toward his daughter. The trap had officially snapped shut. The golden child was finally going to face the severe, uncompromising consequences of his own actions, and there was absolutely nothing our mother could do to protect him this time. Marcus reached his daughter just as Leo managed to tear one of the printed bank statements out of her hand. But it was too late. The damage was entirely done. Chloe handed the rest of the thick stack directly to her father. Her hands were shaking so violently that a few pages slipped and fluttered to the polished oak floor. I could see the thick black mascara streaking down her face, ruining her perfect, expensive makeup. She backed away from Leo as if he were carrying a deadly disease, seeking refuge behind her father's broad shoulders. Marcus took the papers. He calmly reached into his breast pocket, pulled out his reading glasses, put them on, and looked down at the first financial document. I watched his posture shift entirely. This was a man who built his entire life around reading complex contracts, identifying corporate liabilities, and systematically destroying people who tried to cheat him out of a single dollar. He did not need an hour to understand what he was looking at. He recognized the corporate account numbers. He recognized the offshore routing details in the Cayman Islands. He recognized the exact, staggering amount of money that had been quietly bleeding out of his commercial real estate firm over the last 6 months under Leo's management. Marcus looked up from the papers, took off his glasses, and stared directly at Leo. If looks could physically harm someone, my brother would have been reduced to ashes right there on the dance floor. Leo held his hands up, palms facing outward, his mouth moving a mile a minute. I knew exactly what he was doing. He was deploying his usual pathetic strategy. He was lying through his perfectly capped teeth. He was gaslighting. He was probably telling Marcus that the documents were completely forged, that it was a sick, elaborate joke, that someone was actively trying to frame him. He pointed aggressively toward the hallway doors, his face red with rage, probably screaming my name, blaming the bitter, jealous older brother who was seated by the trash cans. But then, the final, devastating piece of the puzzle fell into place. The secondary twist that Leo never, ever saw coming. Julian, the best man, stepped out of the neat line of groomsmen. Julian looked absolutely terrified. His face was the color of chalk, and he was sweating through his custom tuxedo, but he walked straight up to Marcus. I watched Julian reach into his own jacket and pull out his personal smartphone. He unlocked the screen and handed the device directly to the terrifying CEO. Julian was providing the digital receipts. He was actively showing Marcus the live, scrolling text threads between him and Leo. He was proving beyond a shadow of a doubt that the printed screenshots in the silver box were not forged. He was verifying every single horrible word, every single plot to steal the inheritance and initiate a lucrative divorce later down the line. That was the exact moment the illusion shattered completely and irreparably. His own best friend, the man who was supposed to stand by him, hand him the wedding rings, and lie for him, had handed over the final nail in his coffin because his conscience could no longer handle the guilt. Marcus did not yell. He did not throw a physical punch. He did something much, much worse. He walked over to the frozen MC, calmly took the microphone from the man's trembling hands, and turned to face the hundreds of wealthy, influential guests gathered in the room. I rolled down my car window just a fraction. The freezing Vermont night air rushed in, carrying the amplified, booming sound of Marcus's voice clearly across the parking lot. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marcus said. His voice was cold, heavy, and completely devoid of warmth. It was the voice of a man executing a brutal corporate termination. "I sincerely apologize for the abrupt interruption to this evening, but this wedding is officially over. There will be no further celebration. Please gather your belongings and leave the premises immediately." A collective, massive gasp echoed from the ballroom. It sounded like all the oxygen had been violently sucked out of the space. Women clutched their pearls. Men began murmuring frantically. "Furthermore," Marcus continued, his voice echoing off the glass walls, ensuring every single person heard him, "Leo Hayes, you are officially terminated from your position at my firm, effective right this second. My legal team will be contacting you first thing Monday morning regarding the severe financial discrepancies and embezzlement in the accounts you manage. I strongly suggest you retain a very good defense lawyer, because I will personally ensure that you face full federal criminal charges for corporate fraud. You will not see a single dime of my family's money, and you will never work in this state again." Leo stumbled backward as if he had been shot in the chest. He looked around wildly, his eyes wide with sheer, unadulterated terror. The perfect, untouchable golden boy was suddenly exposed as a common, greedy thief in front of the most powerful people in his entire social circle. My mother, Eleanor, completely lost her mind. I watched her run onto the dance floor, her expensive silk dress tangling around her legs, almost tripping her. She grabbed Marcus by the arm, pleading with him, crying hysterically. She was probably trying to use the exact same pathetic excuses she used when she covered up Leo's theft from the church fund all those years ago. "He's just a boy," she was likely sobbing. "It is a massive misunderstanding. Please, Marcus, do not ruin his life. Arthur did this to him. Arthur planted those papers." Marcus looked down at my mother's manicured hand on his arm with absolute visceral disgust. He pulled his arm away sharply, leaving her stumbling. He leaned into the microphone one last time. "Eleanor," Marcus said, his voice dripping with absolute venom. "Get your criminal son out of my sight right now, before I have the resort security drag him out of here by his hair. This entire family is a disgrace." Chloe, who had been weeping silently behind her father, suddenly stepped forward. She pulled the massive, diamond engagement ring off her finger. She threw it directly at Leo's chest. It hit his tuxedo jacket and bounced onto the polished wood floor, rolling away into the shadows under a table. She turned around and walked out of the ballroom, surrounded by her protective bridesmaids, leaving Leo standing completely alone, utterly exposed, in the center of the room. My father looked like he was going to have a massive heart attack. He stood by the VIP table, staring blankly at the floor, absolutely humiliated to his core. The wealthy friends he had been trying to impress all night were already backing away from him, grabbing their coats, whispering furiously to each other as they headed for the main exits. The social standing my parents valued more than their own flesh and blood evaporated into thin air in less than 5 minutes. Let's pause for a moment. Thank you for staying with me this far, you're truly amazing. Please help me by liking the video and commenting the number 1 below so I know you've been here with me until this point. This not only helps more people discover this story, but also lets me know that my experiences mean something to someone. Your support is the greatest motivation for me to keep sharing the rest of this journey. I sat in my cold car, listening to the chaotic symphony of a toxic family finally collapsing under the massive weight of its own lies. I watched horrified guests pour out of the front doors, their faces tight with shock and malicious gossip. Valets were running frantically to retrieve the luxury cars. The beautiful, flawless wedding had turned into a massive crime scene. I rolled up my window, cutting off the noise entirely. I put the car in drive, turned on my headlights, and slowly pulled out of the lakeside resort parking lot. I did not speed. I did not spin my tires. I drove back to Boston with the steady, calm, measured rhythm of a man who had finally paid off a massive, lifelong debt. The long drive back to my small apartment in Boston was the most peaceful 3 hours of my entire adult life. The highway signs blurred past in the dark, illuminated only by my headlights, and for the first time since I was a little boy trying to earn a single word of praise, I did not feel the heavy, suffocating weight of my parents' expectations pressing down on my chest. I had finally taken the scalpel and severed the infected limb from my body. When I woke up the next morning, the sunlight was streaming brightly through my bedroom window. The city outside was quiet. I walked into the kitchen, made myself a strong cup of black coffee, and finally looked at my cell phone. I had left it on silent and face down on the counter the entire night. The screen was completely lit up with a barrage of notifications. There were 16 missed calls from my mother. There were 3 missed calls from my father. There were dozens of text messages, a chaotic, unhinged mix of furious demands, threats, and desperate pleading. I opened the first voicemail from my mother. Her voice was shrill, completely frantic. "Arthur, what did you do? What did you do? You ruined your brother's life. Marcus is threatening a massive lawsuit. He took all the corporate accounts away from Leo. They are talking about federal fraud charges. Call me right now, we need to fix this. You need to tell Marcus it was a fake." I deleted it and played the next one, left an hour later. "Arthur, please. You have to tell Marcus that Julian fabricated those documents because he was jealous. You have to tell them it was a prank that went too far. Your father is sick over this. His blood pressure is through the roof. Leo is crying in his hotel room. We are your family. How could you do this to your own blood? They were still doing it. It was absolutely pathological. Even when presented with absolute, undeniable legal proof of Leo's crimes, they still wanted me to fall on the sword. They wanted me to lie to a CEO, risk my own freedom, and play the villain just so the golden child could escape the consequences of his felony. My mother's final text, sent right around sunrise, was the most pathetic of all. Arthur, please answer. I didn't know it was this bad. We didn't know he was doing that. That was the ultimate, unforgivable lie. They always knew. They knew exactly who he was when he stole the church funds and let me take the blame. They knew who he was when he manipulated Aunt Beatrice for money. They chose to be completely blind because seeing the truth meant admitting they had raised a sociopathic monster. I did not reply to a single message. I did not explain myself. I opened my phone settings, selected their contacts, and pressed block. I blocked my mother. I blocked my father. I blocked Leo, Aunt Beatrice, and every single extended family member who had ever looked at me with pity or disdain. I erased them from my digital life just as easily and completely as they had erased me from their family photo albums. 2 full years passed. 2 years of absolute, glorious, uninterrupted silence. In that time, my life transformed in ways I never thought possible. Without the constant emotional drain of my family holding me back, I poured all my energy, late nights, and creativity into my graphic design business. Sarah and I worked tirelessly. We landed a massive corporate branding contract with a tech firm that effectively tripled our revenue overnight. We moved out of our cramped, windowless apartment office and rented a beautiful, sunlit commercial studio space in the heart of the city. I was finally earning a salary that would have made Aunt Beatrice choke on her expensive red wine. More importantly, Sarah and I started dating. We built a relationship on actual mutual respect, trust, and honesty, things I had never experienced in my childhood home. Within 18 months, I bought a ring with my own hard-earned money and asked her to marry me. She said yes. I was genuinely happy. I had built my own table, and I was surrounded by people who actually wanted me to sit at it. We even started looking at real estate, planning to buy our first house together. But toxic roots run incredibly deep, and sometimes they try to break through the concrete one last time when they are starving for nutrients. It was a rainy Tuesday afternoon. I was sitting at my large oak desk in the new studio, reviewing some branding materials on my monitor, when the front door chimed. I didn't look up immediately, assuming it was a courier delivering prints. But when the room stayed eerily quiet, I finally raised my eyes and saw 2 elderly people standing awkwardly in the reception area. It took my brain a full 3 seconds to recognize them. It was my parents, Richard and Eleanor. They looked absolutely terrible. The 2 years had not been kind to them. My father had seemingly aged 10 years. His posture was stooped, his hair was entirely white, and his formerly expensive suit hung loosely on his frail frame, looking dusty and unkempt. My mother looked exhausted, her hair unstyled, the arrogant, judgmental pride completely stripped from her hollow eyes. They looked like people who had been put through a brutal, unforgiving meat grinder. Sarah saw them first. She immediately stepped out from behind her desk, her face hardening into a fierce, protective mask. She knew exactly what they had done to me, but I held up a hand, signaling her that I would handle it. I stood up, buttoned my blazer, and walked into the reception area, stopping a good 5 feet away from them. Arthur? My mother breathed, tears instantly welling in her eyes, her lower lip trembling. Oh, Arthur, you look so good. You look so successful. What are you doing here? I asked. My voice was perfectly level, devoid of any warmth or anger. I did not invite them to sit down on the waiting room couch. I did not offer them coffee or water. My father cleared his throat nervously, looking at the floor rather than meeting my eyes. We needed to see you, son. We wanted to apologize. We were wrong. We were so incredibly wrong about everything. We miss you. We want to be a family again. I stared at them. 10 years ago, hearing those words would have broken me. I would have collapsed into their arms, eager and desperate for the scraps of affection they were finally throwing my way. But now, standing in the business I built myself, all I felt was a cold, analytical suspicion. Why now? I asked, crossing my arms over my chest, planting my feet firmly. It has been 2 years. Not a single letter. Not a single message through a third party. Why show up today, unannounced, at my place of business? My mother started crying in earnest, reaching out a trembling hand to grab my arm. I took a deliberate step back, out of her reach. She let her hand fall to her side, looking pathetic. "It's Leo," she sobbed, burying her face in her hands. Marcus didn't just fire him. He filed a massive civil lawsuit and handed all the evidence over to the district attorney. Leo is facing serious federal jail time for embezzlement and corporate fraud. The legal fees have completely drained our retirement accounts. We had to take out a second mortgage on the house just to pay his bail. The college funds, the savings, the inheritance, it is all gone. Everything is gone. The lawyers are demanding a massive retainer to keep him out of prison. And there it was, the ugly, unvarnished, transactional truth. They were not standing in my office because they missed their son. They were not here because they had experienced a sudden, miraculous moral awakening and realized how terribly they had treated me for 3 decades. They were here because they were completely, utterly bankrupt. They were here because the golden child had finally burned their house down to the foundation, and they needed someone to hand them a bucket of water and a blank check. "So," I said, leaning casually against the reception desk, looking down at the 2 strangers who raised me, "You are broke. Leo is going to federal prison. And you looked me up, saw my studio online, saw that my business is doing well, and decided it was the perfect time to play the 'We Are Family' card. What exactly is the ask here? You want me to dip into my salary to pay for his high-powered defense lawyer? You want me to liquidate my business assets to save your house from foreclosure?" My father flinched as if I had slapped him. He looked up at me with desperate, pleading eyes. "Arthur, please, try to understand. He is your brother. If he goes to federal prison, his life will be completely ruined. He won't survive in there. We just need a loan. Just enough to cover the retainer for a good defense attorney. You have so much now. You have this beautiful office, a thriving business. We can draft a legal contract. We will pay you back, I swear it." I actually laughed. It was a short, sharp, humorless sound that echoed off the high ceilings of the studio and startled both of them. "A contract?" I asked, narrowing my eyes at my father. "You want to sign a contract? Like the college fund that was supposed to be mine, the one you illegally liquidated to pay for his fraternity parties and vacations? Or like the church fund he stole, the one Mom blamed on me to protect his perfect, pristine reputation from the neighbors?" My mother gasped loudly, taking a step back, her face turning pale. You knew about the church fund?" "I found your journal, Mom," I said, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous register that commanded absolute attention. "I found it 3 years ago on Thanksgiving. I read the entry. I know exactly who you are. Both of you. You spent 32 years treating me like an annoying inconvenience. You sent me to sit by the industrial trash cans at his wedding because you were fundamentally ashamed of me. You watched him humiliate me in the hallway, and you did absolutely nothing. You let me take the blame for his crimes so you could keep playing the perfect suburban family. We made mistakes," my father pleaded, his voice cracking, tears finally spilling down his wrinkled cheeks. "We were foolish, but family helps family in a crisis. You can't just abandon your own blood when they are drowning." "You are not my family," I stated clearly, the words ringing out with absolute finality in the quiet studio. "You lost the absolute right to call yourselves my family a very long time ago. I am not opening my wallet to save a criminal who tried to ruin an innocent woman's life for a real estate portfolio. I am not saving the parents who actively enabled his behavior and punished me for existing. You bet everything on Leo. You bet your money, your reputation, your house, and your love entirely on him. Now, the game is over and you get to live with the payout. Arthur, please, I am begging you, my mother wailed, dropping to her knees right there on the polished hardwood floor of my office, sobbing hysterically. If the bank takes the house, we will have absolutely nowhere to go. We are old. We have nothing left. I looked down at the woman who had brought me into this world, kneeling at my feet, crying over money and the son she loved more than me. I felt a brief, fleeting moment of pity, a ghost of the child who used to crave her hug. But it was quickly, permanently swallowed by the overwhelming, solid sense of justice and self-respect. Then you better hope Aunt Beatrice has a spare bedroom in her mansion, I said coldly, looking her dead in the eyes. Because my door is permanently closed. To all of you. I turned to Sarah, who was watching the exchange with quiet, unshakable strength. Sarah, please call building security and have these two individuals escorted off the premises immediately. If they refuse to leave, call the police and file a formal trespassing report. My father's face turned bright red with profound, inescapable shame. He reached down, grabbed my mother by the arm, and forcefully pulled her to her feet. He didn't say another word. He realized, finally, that the well was completely dry and the bridge was entirely burned. He half-dragged my weeping mother out the heavy glass doors of the studio. The door chimed cheerfully as it closed behind them. I stood there for a long moment, listening to their slow, defeated footsteps fade down the carpeted hallway. The air in the studio felt instantly lighter. The lingering, toxic ghost of my past had finally been exorcised from my life. Sarah walked over and wrapped her arms tightly around my waist, resting her head against my shoulder. I kissed the top of her head, breathing in the scent of her shampoo, feeling entirely anchored in the beautiful present I had built. Later that evening, I sat on the back wooden porch of the home Sarah and I had just purchased in the suburbs. The sun was setting slowly over the treeline, painting the sky in brilliant, fiery shades of orange and deep purple. I held a glass of iced tea, listening to the crickets start their evening chorus, the air smelling of fresh-cut grass and peace. I thought about the squeaky folding chair next to the trash cans in that cold, bleach-smelling hallway. I thought about the heavy silver box. I thought about the sheer, satisfying terror on Leo's face when Marcus took the microphone and destroyed his entire world. Leaving that wedding was the hardest, scariest thing I had ever done in my life. It felt like stepping blindly off a cliff in the dark. But when I finally hit the ground, I realized I hadn't fallen. I had landed. Walking away from people who actively diminish your worth is not a sign of weakness. It is not a failure of loyalty. It is the ultimate necessary act of self-preservation. It is the absolute beginning of your freedom. If you are listening to this right now, and you are sitting at a table where you are being served absolutely nothing but disrespect, silence, and pathetic crumbs of affection, please hear me. You do not have to stay. You do not owe them your sanity. You do not have to shrink yourself down to make them comfortable in their lies. You have the absolute power to stand up, walk out the door, and build a beautiful table of your own. The silence that follows the storm is the most beautiful sound in the world. Thank you so much for listening to my story today. It means the world to be able to share this truth and know I am not just shouting into the void. Have you ever faced something similar with your own toxic family? Have you ever had to walk away and cut ties to save yourself? Share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next journey.